Under the dim light of this noisy era, there is a truth no one dares to speak aloud. Every time you step outside to blend into the crowd, you surrender a part of your own power. They call staying home laziness, an escape. But Machiavelli would ask you a different question. Why expose yourself to hollow conversations, probing eyes, and expectations that were never yours to bear? In a world that worships busyness, you are led to believe that your worth lies in the number of connections you have, in compliments, in parties stacked one after another. But deep within, you know that's not true. There are nights when you return home after abandoning the noise behind you, only to feel more hollow than ever. It is in this very moment when you sit alone in a quiet room that real power emerges. Machiavelli understood well. The one who knows when to withdraw is the one who cannot be controlled. So, what makes staying home the ultimate power strategy in the modern age? Let us dive into the truth that few dare to confront. In the modern world, where everyone fights for attention through noise and spectacle, we are conditioned to believe that connection is the breath of life. Social media, parties, fleeting gatherings, all create the illusion that you are surrounded by countless relationships. But Machiavelli, with the cold clarity of someone who understands human nature, would tell you this. Not every connection has value. Most are mere stages where people perform roles to avoid exposing their own fragility. We live in an age where presence is equated with noise. People assume that the more social activities they partake in, the more mature they are, the more places they show up, the more valuable they become. Yet, ironically, this is the subtlest trap. Dull conversations, performative smiles, crowds swollen with people but empty of substance. You are surrounded by faces, yet you feel more alone than ever. Machiavelli would not be surprised. He knew the crowd always operates on layers of pretense. Compliments used to curry favor, smiles used to hide intentions, friendliness exchanged merely for conformity. Humans, driven by the instinct for power, present the best version of themselves to the public. And because of this, truth rarely finds a place among the masses. Amid such chaos, your sense of self is worn down, scattered, pulled away from its core. And that is why the idea that staying home, alone, is not escaping life but returning to yourself, becomes sharper than ever. Machiavelli would see withdrawal not as weakness, but as strategic foresight. For only when you are no longer under the influence of others' gaze can you hear your own true voice, the voice society constantly tries to make you forget. Solitude, viewed through Machiavelli's lens, is not a sign of psychological isolation but a manifestation of inner strength. Those with depth do not fear silence. They do not need noise to validate their existence. They do not require dozens of relationships to feel important. They understand that all enduring power is forged in darkness before it shines under public light. Society insists that you must fit in to survive, but Machiavelli would counter. The one who can stand apart is the one truly free. For when you stand alone, no one can steal your independence of thought. No one can dictate how you think, live, or feel. And this, through Machiavelli's eyes, is the highest form of personal power. When you stay home, when you withdraw from meaningless interactions, you are not merely conserving energy. You are choosing to rebuild yourself. You are filtering out disruptive influences, reclaiming sovereignty over your mind. You are doing what 95% of the world never has the courage to do, facing yourself in absolute silence. Not everyone will understand this, but Machiavelli would. The human mind is only powerful when it is not scattered. Solitude is the process of gathering strength, sharpening clarity, consolidating belief, forging power so that one day you step back into the world, not for others, but for yourself. Thus, the thesis of this message is not a gentle modern suggestion, it is a countercurrent declaration. In a world urging you to dissolve into the crowd, dare to stand alone. Because in solitude, you lose nothing, you reclaim everything. Deep within modern life exists a conflict that most people feel, but few dare to name. The noise of society clashing with the true self inside each of us. This is not an external conflict, but a silent battle that plays out every day between what you are forced to display and what you truly feel. And Machiavelli, who understood human nature better than any philosopher, would see this conflict as an invisible mechanism of power. The noisier society becomes, the easier people are to control. Let us begin with the familiar experience the video describes. You go outside, smile at the right moments, nod in all the expected places, and engage in conversations deemed normal. You smile, you blend in, you answer questions that hold no meaning for you. But when the door of your home closes behind you, when the laughter and background music fade, you suddenly feel breathless. Not from physical exhaustion, but because you have just expended a tremendous amount of energy used to uphold a version of yourself society accepts, but that is not truly you. Machiavelli would call this the cost of existing within the crowd. Society forces people to perform, and the larger the crowd, the bigger the stage. Relationships you believed were genuine may merely be transactions of convenience. Conversations you thought were meaningful connections are often nothing more than unconscious repetitions of opinions borrowed from media, from friends, from a collective that does not even know what it is saying. A harsh truth must be spoken. Very few people truly think. Most simply react to what has been poured into their minds. So when you seek authenticity in those interactions, what you receive instead is emptiness. Not because they intend harm, but because they have never dug deep enough within themselves to understand what is truly worth saying. And it is at this moment that Machiavelli would reveal a truth everyone feels, yet no one wants to admit. You are not lonely because you lack people around you. You are lonely because you cannot speak about what truly matters to you. Loneliness does not come from an empty room, but from wearing a social mask all day, a mask designed to be acceptable, agreeable, unobtrusive. But each time you wear it, you take another step away from the part of you that longs to be acknowledged. Machiavelli would go further. That mask is not merely a habit, but a tool of power wielded by society. When you are busy maintaining an image, you have little time or energy to question, to resist, to be free. A person who constantly seeks approval can never become strong. They will live according to the crowd's expectations, speak words that are not their own, and ultimately allow society to define who they are. This is the central conflict of the video. The louder the crowd becomes, the quieter a person grows within themselves. The more gatherings you attend, the fewer chances you have to hear the deepest voice of your own being. And because you cannot speak what truly matters, you become trapped between two worlds. One that demands your performance, and one your inner self that is slowly gasping for air. But Machiavelli would insist that recognizing this conflict is not the end, it is the beginning of personal power. Only when you see the trap can you step out of it. And sometimes the first step is simply this: stop chasing the noise and return to the only place where you do not have to perform yourself. In modern life, people look at those who prefer to be alone with suspicion. Eccentric, overly introverted, not good at socializing. But through Machiavelli's lens, through the eyes of someone who understood power, intelligence, and human motivation, you see a truth the majority will never grasp. The more intelligent, the stronger, the richer the inner world of a person, the less they need the external world. Not because they hate people, but because they cannot pretend in the face of superficiality. Machiavelli once wrote, "The more a man has within himself, the less he needs from others." He would undoubtedly nod at this, yet he would take it further. The intelligent avoid the crowd not to protect themselves, but to protect the sharpness of their mind. The crowd, with its empty conversations, borrowed opinions, and reflexive behaviors, creates a kind of mental pollution. And those with heightened intelligence feel it more intensely than anyone else. Machiavelli called this the fatigue of the soul, the exhaustion that does not come from doing too much, but from suppressing too much. In a crowd, the intelligent must shrink themselves, simplify their thoughts, hide their depth, so as not to make others uncomfortable. They cannot speak of what truly matters, nor ask the questions they ache to explore. And, as Machiavelli warned, whenever you must make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's framework, you are losing yourself. This is why Machiavelli said that when blending into the crowd, a person forfeits 3/4 of their true nature. He would interpret this even more sharply. To be accepted by the crowd, you must surrender the sharpest parts of yourself, your independent reason, your accurate intuition, and your ability to think beyond the trivial. The intelligent cannot endure this sacrifice, not out of arrogance, but because they know the price of conformity is far too high. You cannot become yourself if every day you must adjust your words, your expressions, your thoughts, and even your dreams to fit a collective mold. And that is precisely why they choose solitude. In solitude, they do not have to dilute the complexity within. In solitude, they do not have to dumb down their intellect to fit small, shallow conversations. In solitude, they do not need permission to be themselves. Machiavelli would see solitude as a strategy, withdrawing from the crowd to preserve freedom of thought, the supreme form of power no one can take away. The more intelligent a person is, the more they understand that the mind is a territory that must be protected. And society's noise, its pointless debates, fleeting trends, and compulsive displays of ego is the greatest threat to that territory. Those with high intelligence seek solitude not to isolate themselves, but to expand their capacity, to learn more deeply, to think more clearly, to feel more authentically. They stay alone not to avoid the world, but to prevent the world from dulling the inner voice, what Machiavelli considered the foundation of personal power. If the crowd makes us similar, solitude makes us unique. If the crowd erases boundaries, solitude creates character. If the crowd demands performance, solitude allows existence. Therefore, when the intelligent choose to be alone, it is not an act of escape. It is an act of preservation of essence, of intellect, and of sovereignty over their own spirit. In silence, they do not shrink, they grow. And as Machiavelli would say, the one who knows how to be alone is the one who cannot be subdued. In an age where the eyes of others are constantly upon us, from social media to trivial daily conversations, returning to oneself has become an act that borders on revolutionary. But through Machiavelli's gaze, it is not merely courageous, it is the ultimate strategy of sharp minds, of individuals who understand that intelligence and creativity grow only in the soil of silence. Solitude is not the cage society makes it out to be. For Machiavelli, it is a spiritual fortress, a place where one steps away from expectations, judgments, comparisons, and intrusive gazes. When we stay home, alone, that door closes not to imprison us but to keep the world from invading the most sacred part of our mind. In that silence, we have the opportunity to confront what Jung called the shadow, the hidden parts of the self, the fears we deny, the doubts that once unsettled us, the desires buried out of fear of judgment. Society forces us to act as if we have no shadow, but in solitude, we finally feel safe enough to face it. And that confrontation becomes the gateway to profound wisdom, a kind of understanding Machiavelli believed essential for becoming a strong, untouchable individual. Silence not only helps us hear our fears, it helps us hear our truth, the unfinished ideas, the questions left behind, the beliefs waiting to be uncovered. In a noisy society, that voice is drowned by 100 chaotic sounds. But when we retreat into solitude, the mind begins to operate at a deeper level. Scattered fragments suddenly connect, new inspirations quietly emerge, thoughts no one has taught you become startlingly clear. It is no coincidence that nearly every genius in history entered solitude as if it were the homeland of their mind. Einstein walked alone for hours to solve equations no one else understood. Newton forged world-changing theories during a period of isolation from society. Leonardo da Vinci left the city to observe nature alone, filling hundreds of sketches meant for no one but himself. They did not need applause. They did not need approval. They did not need anyone to validate what they were discovering. They needed only silence, the rarest resource of the modern world. Solitude is a sacred safe zone, not because it is comfortable, but because it is true. It does not color life to entertain us, nor distract us to help us forget. It brings us back to the center of ourselves, where every question waits to be answered by genuine wisdom, not by the slogans society whispers in our ear. Machiavelli would say that the one who does not fear solitude is the one whose inner power cannot be shaken. For when you learn to rely on yourself, to think, to create, and to govern your emotions, you become independent from the crowd's approval. You are no longer defined by society's marketplace of opinions. You no longer need noise to feel valuable. In the quiet, you begin to see your life with clarity. In the quiet, you hear ideas no one has ever thought. And in the quiet, you become the deepest version of yourself. The outside world may promise you many things, but only solitude offers the one thing that matters most: the ability to see, to think, and to create as a truly free individual. In an age where every second is branded as productive, people are pushed into a collective illusion. If you are not busy, not going out, not participating, not socializing, you are falling behind. But to Machiavelli, who always saw through society's polished deceptions, this culture of busyness is nothing but a subtle trap, a net cast to make humans chase goals that were never their own. In the modern world, busyness has become a symbol of worth. People boast about packed schedules as if they were trophies, pride themselves on having no free time, as if that proves they are important. But Machiavelli would immediately ask, are you busy for your own purpose? Or are you busy because you fear being seen as useless when you stand still? This is the boundary most people fail to recognize, and because they fail to recognize it, they surrender ownership of their lives without ever realizing it. The video exposes a lie this era whispers into your ear. Silence is a waste of time. Yet science, and deeper still, philosophy proves the opposite. The brain truly processes information, integrates experience, and creates new connections only when you are doing nothing, when you allow yourself to fall into that seemingly meaningless idleness. Constant busyness forces the mind into perpetual reaction, never independent thought. Meanwhile, silence grants you a privilege almost no one in modern society still possesses: the ability to see the essence of things without interference from noise. Through Machiavelli's eyes, staying home, being alone, is not avoidance, but strategy. It is how the strong preserve their most precious resources: energy, truth, and identity. You cannot become a clear-minded individual if your energy leaks away through meaningless gatherings, repetitive conversations, or relationships that exist only out of politeness. Busyness without purpose is the worst kind of waste, because it tricks you into believing you are moving forward, when in reality you are merely running in circles inside society's invisible wheel. Machiavelli would call this a form of voluntary slavery. You are controlled not by chains, but by the fear that if you stop, you will lose your worth. But when you stay home, alone, you break that entire structure. You begin to say no to what drains your essence, and yes to inner construction. You shift from performing, trying to please society, to truly existing, living by your own rhythm instead of the crowd's. You no longer chase the quantity of relationships, you choose depth. You no longer need to prove you exist. You begin to feel that you exist. The culture of busyness wants you to believe your value comes from how many people know you. But Machiavelli would counter, a person's true value lies in how deeply they understand themselves, not in how many people they know. Instead of a wide but hollow social network, you choose a few real relationships, or even just one relationship that never betrays you, your relationship with yourself. When you stay home, you are not disappearing from the world. You are building the foundation for a return stronger, clearer, and untouchable by collective noise. You stop standing in the role others expect, and begin living as the person you want to become. Machiavelli called this the fatigue of the soul, the exhaustion that does not come from doing too much, but from suppressing too much. In a crowd, the intelligent must shrink themselves, simplify their thoughts, hide their depth, so as not to make others uncomfortable. They cannot speak of what truly matters, nor ask the questions they ache to explore. And, as Machiavelli warned, whenever you must make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's framework, you are losing yourself. This is not laziness. This is the strategy of those wise enough not to let society sweep them away like dry leaves in the wind. Machiavelli did not speak of solitude merely as a state of being, but as a transformational journey of the human self. From his perspective, that journey holds a deeper, strategic meaning. It is the act of becoming invisible to a noisy world, so that one day you may emerge in your truest and strongest form. Being alone, facing the truth about yourself, is something not everyone can do. Most people fear silence, because in silence we hear the questions we've been avoiding. Who am I living for? What truly matters? What do I pursue for myself? And what do I pursue for the crowd? Those questions have the power to shatter the shell society has built around us. And Machiavelli understood well. Only those courageous enough to face truth can ever take command of their own lives. When we dare to leave behind society's noise, its hollow praise, its borrowed standards, its meaningless races, we do not disappear. We liberate ourselves from the illusions that have confined us for so long. We stop relying on likes, public approval, and applause that shifts with the crowd's whims. Instead, we begin building a form of value that cannot be shaken, value born from knowing ourselves. Machiavelli would see this not as a weak retreat, but as a calculated one, a strategic withdrawal to reconstruct the inner self, to return stronger. Like a prince who hides for a time to rebuild his forces, humans, too, need quiet phases to gather back their energy, resilience, and intellect, the very things drained constantly when we live in pursuit of society's noisy expectations. Staying home, in Machiavelli's light, becomes an act of reclaiming power, the power to choose what deserves your energy, the power to say no to lives others want you to live, the power to stop performing and start truly existing. The day you stop searching for external validation is the day you begin to see who you truly are, the person who does not need the crowd to define their worth, the person who does not need the outer world to feel complete, the person who does not need noise to fill the emptiness in their mind. And when you step off society's stage, you realize the only thing that ever held you back was the fear of looking inward. But once you move past that fear, once you dare to stay still long enough to listen, to feel, to reach into your own depth, silence becomes the starting point of a new kind of power. The power of self-mastery, the power of awareness, the power of someone no longer swayed by opinion, expectation, or judgment. And then you realize, the greatest plot twist of your life is not changing your circumstances, not a grand journey, not some external event. The real twist is when you stop and discover that everything you were searching for has always been within you. The video's story, viewed as an outline, is that journey. The journey of someone who believed they were falling behind because they stayed home too much, only to realize, staying home does not make you smaller. Staying home brings you back. And when you return to yourself, that is when you truly appear. In invisibility, you find truth. In silence, you find strength. And in solitude, you find yourself when the door closes and the outside world falls into quiet. That is not the moment you disappear. It is the moment you return to your own territory. Machiavelli would say, "The one who withdraws at the right time is the one who cannot be subdued." Alone, at home, you are no longer governed by eyes, expectations, or judgment. You stand in a space where thought is sharpened, willpower is trained, and the self no longer has to compromise for acceptance. You choose silence over noise. You choose depth over performance. You choose yourself over the world. And that is the choice of the truly powerful. If this video shifts the way you see solitude, if it awakens in you the desire to master your mind, protect your energy, and live aligned with your inner strength, then like, share, and subscribe so you do not miss the next sharp insight. Remember, you do not need to go out to find your worth. Worth is created when you are brave enough to stay still and face yourself.